the general plan and zoning and essentially our ordinances related to our septic systems. So kind of as a one of the action items that came out of our code enforcement study session, the Sabufka map, was to have a study session about the general plan, the land use zoning, and potential for making a general plan amendment. And so we wanted to come today, myself, Doug Libby, principal planner, to give you an overview of the process and hopefully receive some input from yourselves as to certain parts of the county in your districts that you feel might be good opportunities for potentially modifying or changing the current land use designations. I can maybe give a brief overview. Doug's going to speak with and kind of talk about the maps that have been handed out and maybe go through the kind of some of the details of what a general plan amendment involves. I'm going to try to just speak maybe at an overview level. Is that so the current general plan, the 2030 general plan, was adopted in 2011. Since then, there's been 14 amendments made. About half of those were initiated by the department with ordinance changes, and half of those were initiated by projects in the county. State law allows an agency to actually make 4 general plan amendments per year. One of the things that you need to know about a general plan amendment is essentially it involves an environmental document. So the last general plan that was created for the county cost about $1.6 million in consultant services because you have to prepare an environmental document associated with the environmental impacts from land use potential changes. And so kind of what we're going to talk about today a little bit, and we certainly expect this to be maybe a series and kind of an ongoing series of study sessions in order to maybe get to the right areas for land use changes. But we're looking to, essentially propose and suggest land use changes that if we go and recommend a land use change, for example, that goes from being, say something designated to economic employment corridor, and we were to maybe suggest having that go back to ag, that's going to have less environmental impacts. If, on the other hand, that we were to take an environmental area or an agricultural area that's zoned ag, and we say, oh, we should go and zone that M2 to facilitate some type of development, jobs creation in the county, that is going to have far more environmental impacts that need to be investigated and mitigated, and that's typically where a consultant comes back and it can become a more lengthy document. Currently in the fee schedule of development services, if a private landowner were coming and seeking a general plan amendment, the cost alone just for that would be just over $11,000. And so that is essentially obviously meant to kind of capture, that's on a very small scale of just one parcel. So as we kind of discuss, general plan amendments and land use changes, that's essentially what can, trigger that if we are looking at a number of changes and increased impacts, then the identification of the mitigations, whether it's air quality, traffic, all the things that I think that your board has become very familiar with the project presentations you received. So today, we were going to give, like I say, an overview of the process and try to maybe highlight or recommend a few areas. I think what has happened since the general plan was adopted in 2011 is that number one was the impact of the flood maps. And I think we've had a number of study sessions regarding flood maps. The recent adoption of the Sabufka map has given us, kind of better insight as to where the flood zones are, the flood depths are in the county, and they have a dramatic impact on development. And that, unfortunately was not taken into account of the general plan, and the county really didn't do, I'll just say, far-reaching amendment in order to address where the land use changes. Like, for example, it is going to be rather difficult to have some type of commercial industrial space if you're in a FEMA floodplain of any significant depth. And so, and the reason why it's important, for us to kind of identify that and maybe look to change that is because if we were to redesignate it, for example, to ag or some other land use, then those factors play into the economic development components of the general plan. And so, and the growth projections. And I think one of the unfortunate realities of our general plan is that the growth projections that were, looked at and essentially all the growth was based upon, unfortunately just haven't occurred in the county. I think since the adoption in 2011, which has just been about 10 years, I think our county population has gone up a couple thousand total. And, for the most part, that's occurring in the cities of Yuba City and Live Oak. And so the impact of the county is that we make growth projections for development that would occur in the county with the subsequent revenue projections that would come in, and then the increase in services and all those type of things. And when they don't occur, then it kind of leaves the county in a spot. And so that's why we think getting more regular with amendments and updates through your board will provide kind of a clearer picture and maybe help identify the best spots for development. So with that, I will let Doug Livy give an overview of kind of the presentation, the process. Like I say, we would welcome your comments and inputs kind of at any time, maybe even up front. I realize we have a shortened window today, so if there are specific areas of the county that you'd like us to take a look at in your districts, there are some that we're going to propose. But like I say, if there's some that are in yours, we'd like that so that we can study it maybe for a month or two and then come back in a subsequent study session. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point, or we'll let Doug begin.
Do any board members have any questions? Okay, we do have one public speaker. I'm going to ask him to come on up and speak. That way you can address his topic as well during the presentation. And that would be Patrick Kernan. Come on up. Hi, Pat.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon. My name is Pat Kernan. I'm an attorney with Kingsley Bogard out of Folsom. We represent Pleasant Grove Elementary School. And I mainly just wanted to come and share a couple quick thoughts. I wanted to first let you know we are working very hard on trying to get the supplemental mitigation agreement finalized between Lennar and WIN. I know we're coming up on a deadline, and I'm very optimistic. Let me put it that way. And I want to let you know the district supports the project. We embrace joint use, whether it's with the parks or library, county libraries. And then finally, what I wanted to really say is I wanted to let you know how great your staff has been with Doug and Robin and her department. We've been working closely with them, and they've been awesome. So thank you, and go back to your meeting.
Doug, we're ready to.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Doug Libby, Principal Planner. Ahead of today's meeting, we handed out a series of maps for you, and these come from our website. So on the planning website, there is a general plan section, and there's a series of general plan maps. It starts out with a kind of a big picture countywide map, and you can see in there most of the county a lighter green, which is an Ag 80. Areas north and south of Yuba City is an agricultural 20-acre area for new land divisions. And then along the Sacramento River and along the Feather River, we have some locations of Ag 40. And that makes up most of Sutter County. The maps that follow the countywide map, you would see focus on our cities, spheres of influence areas, as well as our rural communities. Now, you will, probably one of our largest rural community would be Sutter, the Sutter Rural Plan Community, and that map would be approximately 4 maps in the stack that's before you. And you can see in this map agricultural areas that were yellow identified for estate residential. You'll also see an underutilized area on the northeast side of Sutter called AGRC. That's an ag rural community. It's fairly underutilized and would allow for parcel sizes of 2.5 acres being zoned ag. So that land use designation, although underutilized currently, if the board wanted to allow an opportunity for additional growth in Sutter that was larger than estate residential, that may be an option. And I bring that up based upon comments we heard in the past from citizens who live out in the Sutter area.
Through the chair. On when you look at P right here, right to which would be east of the commercial that the elementary school used to own, then it was sold to a private individual.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we behoove us? I mean, of course, with public knowledge, probably convert that back to agriculture.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'll wait up, guys. 1-4. It's four pages in the Sutter Rule Plan. If you look right there on the where it says AG-40 right there on the bottom, you'll see a little P, a P in a blue. That used to be owned by Britain Elementary School. They sold it a couple years ago, so now it's not public anymore. So that, and I think it's something we should definitely consider when you spoke about, I don't know how many houses you can cram in one community with water issues and so forth, but that might not be a bad, up for discussion, spreading those lots, making them a little larger. And then we look at over there with Irwin and Perry Street right there. Now, that's ER, state residential.
It is currently, yes.
So that would be, what is that? That's basically your quarter acre lots? Or?
Yeah, so the ER, because as you know, there's no municipal wastewater system in Sutter, it's unserved by septics. Parcel sizes for a state residential range from a minimum of half acre up to a maximum of 3 acres.
Okay. So when we look at that, I mean, that's still a producing orchard there. I mean, have we ever considered possibly taking that back to agriculture?
It was when we went through the general plan update a decade ago, it was the board's decision to designate the estate residential for those areas. But yeah, so with a consensus of the board wanting to consider either taking an area back to either an ag RC, that's an ag rural community, that's a lower density, or if the board would wish to.
You said an ag or C?
Yeah, if you look on the northeast side of Sutter, you'll see a red area that says AG-RC.
Right.
That stands for ag rural community. And it allows for a theoretical minimum of 2.5 acre parcels served by septic.
All right, that's something to talk about. All right. Well, hey, thank you very much.
So this plan is about 10 years old, right? And how much longer is this good till 30? Is that why it's called 2030?
Yes, Supervisor Cohn, this would be viewed as the midpoint in the plan's life. It's not unusual to come back to decision makers, check in on the status, what's working, what's not working, what revisions we may need to see. And, one of the, decisions your board has to make from a policy standpoint is because the plan is midpoint in its life cycle, do you wish to make significant changes now, or do you wish to hold off and start reserving money, setting aside money for a comprehensive update? And we noted in your staff report that, staff would probably envision starting a comprehensive general plan update process probably within 6 years. So that by the time we hit 2030, there would be a new plan in place, presumably a 2050 plan.
So, Doug, one last question. How do you think it's holding up, this plan? Do you see significant problems with it, or is it, I know we all have little things that we talk about that need to be changed, but what is your feeling for it?
My thoughts are that the plan has met its goal of protecting agricultural land. It does a very good job at that. But as Director Hay mentioned, and I'll just go over a couple points here, and this was reflected in your staff report. So table 3.4 of the general plan, which was included as an attachment, based upon all the growth that was envisioned, it was estimated that a 2030 plan provided for 32,849 dwelling units, resulting in a potential population of approximately 91,520 residents. The plan also provides for over 75 million square feet of non-residential uses, resulting in a potential of 85,000 plus employees. Now, growth projections that were taken at the time, as Director Hay noted, they came from numerous sources, including from SACOG, California Department of Finance, California Employment Development Department, and in your staff report? I'm in the staff report.
Where you were just mentioning you were talking about the houses in the area, then you were talking about the area for commercial growth or businesses. That's what I don't believe 10 years ago that they anticipated FEMA coming in saying, hey, we're going to take all that nice prime ground you have in Sutter County and we're going to make it worthless because we're going to impose our will and pull back your chance to even give a variance for it. So,
yeah, so where the plan, I think, and I was just going to touch on, and Supervisor Ziegemeier was heading right there just before me, that the plan didn't take into account the constraints to development that the county has, and that is either the FEMA floodplain boundaries, as the supervisor mentioned, or the locally designated floodplains that we were required to adopt, I think, about 2016. And then it didn't entertain the lack of infrastructure necessary to allow development. And what we mean by that is whether it's some type of a sewer system, some type of a municipal water system, drainage, or necessary road infrastructure. So because of those, we have some nice colors on the map, but we've been kind of tied with our hands behind our back, unable to develop some of these areas. And because of the floodplains, even with the revised floodplain boundary that your board recently adopted based upon Sabufka's work, areas south of Yuba City, so I'm thinking around the employment corridor area around Oswald and 99, that's several feet in a floodplain. And so with very little infrastructure. And so from a policy standpoint is, do you wish to leave an area like that as employment corridor? It's been 10 years. It has not developed as we hoped. Or is it better served to return that back to agriculture? A follow-up thought would be further to the south down at 113 and 99. There is some industrial areas down there, predominantly owned by Jaswant Baines down there. It was designated industrial as part of the last general plan update. It's in I'll say, even under the revised floodplain maps, 5 to 10 feet of flood depth. Does it make sense to have that there? Or does it make more sense to return that back to agriculture and look at growth opportunities maybe in some other areas? So getting back to your comment, Supervisor Conant, was that yes, the general plan has worked to protect the county's agricultural interests. You know, we still have almost, upper 80%, 87, 88% of the county is dedicated to agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, no, that answers my questions, yeah.
So I guess a follow-up question for the board is, when you go through the maps and you see areas of the county, are there areas where the board may want to consider additional development? And when I say consider additional development, I'm going to say possibly even additional residential type uses, knowing that most of our county is significantly impacted by flood and will likely remain in agriculture for the well into the foreseeable future.
Yeah, through the chair. So I guess just one recommendation, I guess it would have been kind of helpful if maybe we had an overlay of the flood map on top of this. So, I mean, something that comes to my mind is when you're talking about this employment corridor out on Highway 99, that how it'd be 5 feet underwater according to the map, we could probably move that over to Highway 20 that is out of, any flood risk, and, maybe take it from, just for, township to Acacia. It's just one example that, one idea that I want to put out there. And then another thing, just looking into as the city of Yuba City has just rescinded the Lincoln East Pacific Plan in my district, that how do we as a county, if we want to develop, how do we bring in infrastructure to support, any type of development? If it was, if we wanted to build 1,000, 2,000 homes within the county, that how can we do something like that?
Oftentimes, it takes a large developer to be able to front that infrastructure cost, and that's one of the reasons why in South Sutter County, that was always the big nut to crack, is the infrastructure needed to serve development. So some of you may remember that the county actually put forth in the very early 2000s its own commercial industrial specific plan in South Sutter County. It was approved by the board at the time. It was legally challenged, but due to the infrastructure lack thereof and the inability for the county to define specifically when wastewater infrastructure would come online, the county was required to vacate that specific plan. And at that point, that opened the door for the residential home builders to come in, such as Lennar, and say, listen, we understand you need infrastructure. We will help finance that through basically rooftops, homes, to spread that cost over many end users.
So just one thought, again, goes back to the Lincoln East Pacific Plan. There's a water system that was in place that was put in by some developers that walked away after the last, kind of boom. And would there ever be any consideration from the county or something to come in and allow septics being built on, these estate residential lots or something like that within my district? Because I know that what I'm getting from not just my constituents, but general consensus from the community, people want to build. They want to build now. They want us to open up, whether there's a moratorium, whatever you want to call it, on the ranchettes. This is, people want to build. They want to stay in this community, and there's not enough lots out there for them.
Could you articulate what size lots are folks interested in?
The estate residential type of, going anywhere and building on at least an acre to 2 acres, or anything along the way. And people want to, even if it's the low density or we do not have enough residential lots in this community. There's nothing out there.
One thing the board could consider is higher density is intended to be within the sphere of influence to be served by cities, because that's where density is supposed to happen. But one thing the board could do is, although currently you have a policy in place that says the amount of estate residential land that is currently there, until it's built out, we're not going to do anymore. We could revise that policy to say the board would be interested in considering additional estate residential development within a defined area, possibly around the Yuba City sphere of influence. And I think that could potentially address some of the feedback you hear from your constituents.
I think that would be a really good way to address your comments, Supervisor Baines. So I think that's really good. Did any other board members have any comments on that? Because that sounds like a good solution for Supervisor Baines' recommendation. Yeah.
The one thing I might add, just from a planning standpoint, is one of the frustrations that the previous board had with ranchettes is that they were developed somewhat randomly across the county, and they created a lot of impacts and, I'll just say, controversial public hearings between people who wanted ranchette development and folks who wanted to maintain agriculture. So I might suggest that if we wanted to go that direction, to consider certain development, that we put a limit around it, such as either a half mile around the Yuba City sphere of influence, or even possibly up to a mile. Food for thought for your board.
That sounds like a good recommendation as well. So,
Through the chair,
yes.
if I may. On this or other policies, I think one thing that the county takes criticism for at times is when there's the appearance of, my neighbor got to do this, but I didn't. And I know we're not going to always be able to solve all of that, but maybe that should be one of our things we look at when we're thinking situations through for policy changes is it fair to everyone, or as fair as we can be? Just because it is tough to answer when someone's able to do something but your neighbor isn't, or if I lived on this side of the street, I'd be fine. So just something to think about.
Through the chair. Yeah, and where you're going on that, in my rural community of Sutter, where I hang my hat, we just don't have the infrastructure. And if we had it, I'm all for it. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's awesome to see people being able to move back into a town that they grew up in, whether it be Sutter, Yuba City, and so forth, and there would be homes for them to buy when they graduate, and move on and want to move back. But with also, once again, I mean, we have so much infrastructure we got to put in. I mean, we don't get this SAFER grant, or something work out. We got no firefighters, from our deputies to, it's just from our water. I mean, we're in a drought right now, and my community and Supervisor Conan's community, we rely heavily on our wells. And if our wells go dry, we could be sitting in a huge Robbins catastrophe where here's bottled water for 2, 3, 4 years. So that's one thing I want to have in mind too, is, but yeah, we need houses. That's a no-brainer. That's it. We have to. We got to figure out the right way. And I love your idea of figuring out where to put that commercial corridor, or figuring out where makes sense. We can't do it here, so maybe we look out in the 3rd District right there on Highway 20. It's a great idea.
From Township, you could go all the way to the bridge if you want to go
Yeah,
up to.
I mean, it's out of a flood. It's out of a floodplain, and we need infrastructure here. And yeah, I like it.
The only concern that I would express that it'll come to some future applicant is if we were to redesignate or relocate some employment corridor land to the Highway 20 corridor, is that, that road currently is a 4-lane, somewhat of an expressway. It's limited access as you head out of town. And at some point, that growth is going to generate the need for some type of signalization. So as long as that's understood.
Better, you could just put roundabouts at every intersection. Right, that was just a joke, sir.
I did not interpret that as policy direction. So I think we were having a good dialogue and good back and forth on some of the possible changes that your board may like to see. Those are two very, I don't want to say large policy, but it's definitely a policy shift that we would like to probably go back, probably better define that, articulates kind of the changes to the draft policies that would be needed, and then we would probably need to bring that forward to you through another study session to preview that before going through any future process.
Through the chair. What about in Sutter, we have a few lots that are commercial that are not commercial. Like what I'm getting at when you're on your California Street, and I believe there's a couple on Washington Street. And I've had constituents ask, why are these zoned commercial when there's actually a house right there and a house and then an empty lot? Because stuff like that makes sense that those should be residential. Because the owners want them to be residential because there's no commercial there, and they cannot put commercial. And then you have your places along Fortner Road and Dresser Road where there's already homes right there. So why, let's say if someone's got 20 acres and they want it split apart 1 acre to build their home. Well, they can't go to the bank and get a loan on that 20 acres because everything, the way everything is, and they can't split it because it's not policy. And to me, it makes sense when there's home. You're not disturbing anything. You're not taking something and changing it. It's wide open. So I have a lot of people asking me about that in my district on, can we look into that, whether it be a case-by-case basis or whatever, because we'd love to have a house. Everyone else has houses along that street, but we can't put a house out there. So.
Keep agricultural viable, you need not only a few homes just to watch the property, but you also need to have infrastructure like shops and hulling plants and rice dryers and so on and so forth. You can't haul that product all to Yuba City in the bulk, so it's important that we have that side of the agricultural infrastructure with ag to make it viable.
Just going back to Supervisor Conant's the comment, and I agree, but like, for example, F Park was designated how many years ago and has attracted nobody.
And I think Supervisor Baines, thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's for those who don't know, the F Park, which stands for Food Processing, Agricultural, Recreation Combining District. I apologize, it's a mouthful. Staff did not create that. It was a what's called ballot box zoning established in the early 1980s, and so it has some very strict provisions. You might remember the old South Ridge Golf Course. That was in the open space portion of F Park. The area south of South Butte is, some people refer to it as the industrial portion of F Park. However, it's really the food processing portion. The board is limited on what it can do in F Park. You can broaden some uses, and that's specifically built into the approved ballot measure, but significant changes would require it to go back to the voters. And I think it was approximately 10 years ago, the board did put something on the ballot, and citizens rejected that. However, the board a past board did broaden some uses and allowed some light industrial uses through a use permit in the F Park area.
But again, if infrastructure was there, it makes sense. There's no infrastructure. How are you going to attract any type of food processing? There's nothing there. And you're in a flood zone.
Sorry, George Washington, Eager Road, 113 and 99. So I'd like to see some planning around that, like how we could designate some areas that would actually work for those truck yards that could actually be used. It's a similar problem, not so much the infrastructure, but being able to be somewhat out of the flood zone where they can actually develop these, and then somewhat, out of sight, out of mind, so we don't have so many issues. And then also they're able to be on an interstate so that they can access the roads.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I agree with Supervisor Flores on that. I think we should definitely look at all our flood zones and say, that's a great place to put these truck routes. Or, I'm sorry, trucking outfits. Because, they could put the porta potties out there, bring in like a modular trailer, and I think it's a great idea. It's bringing jobs into ground that we can't do anything with. Yeah, great idea.
Through the chair. I agree with that. Quick question for you, Doug. That Highway 20 corridor, I think, is perfect for trying to steer some of the trucking out in that direction. But the problem still remains in that they would have to build bathrooms or offices on like a second story, correct? Because it would be in a flood.
Portion of the Highway 20 corridor is actually outside of the floodplain,
Okay.
west of Yuba City. Now, as you get closer to our
Sutter.
rural community of Sutter, then yes, there's floodplain there. But so it would not require this significant elevation to put in a repair shop or other amenities.
Okay.
But it would require people to the applicants who desired to have that to fund the necessary likely signalization to safely get trucks on and off the highway.
And just a clarification while I've got you here, if they were to build in those flood zone areas like a shop, it could elevate a lot of those things, but still it's a question of not being able to have employees working in there, correct?
So as long as if you have a repair shop, and as long as the floor of that repair shop is at the base flood elevation, then you're fine.
Okay.
Now the problem is using the example down at 113 and 99, we have this wonderful interchange down there, and for parking of trucks and getting those trucks on and off the highway, it's a great location, but it's somewhere upwards of 10 feet deep in a floodplain.
But
Thank you.
But you could, in that location, come with an alternative plan, or either elevating key infrastructure, like maybe if you decided to put a Flying J or something like that in, you could elevate on a pad the pumps and the fueling areas and a restaurant and so on and so forth to that 10 feet. Or possibly even build infrastructure where the bottom floor would be something that wouldn't get hurt if it got flooded, and the upper floor would be the restaurant, gift shop, whatever.
Absolutely.
Through the chair, I'm just thinking forward of like if we ever did get these FEMA maps reduced in like 10 years from now, and how do you explain to somebody why they're fueling and the restaurant sitting on top of a small mountain? You know, just yeah.
But they'll have a great view of Sutter County.
Through the chair. Like I said, we have to use the rules against FEMA. We find a way through to get through, whether it be buildings with no sides. I'm sorry, with you know what I mean, just the pillars to keep guys out of the weather. Whether it be the office trailers, porta potties. There's got to be ways that we could work around this, that we could actually make that ground valuable to someone, for those trucking companies to move their trucking outfits out there and to allow for that growth in the city or in the county.
Through the chair. Yeah, I think we talked about that with John Nicoletti, I believe, and maybe having a meeting to talk about how to maybe do that if there were some workarounds. So we need to check back in with him and see about when we're going to set that up. Thanks.
To the chair. I just had a quick question. Doug, on truck yards, let's assume a truck yard was wanting to go somewhere where there was a 6 or 8 foot flood depth. Can they construct a building that, let's say they elevate part of the land, but the parking lot, which is many acres because of all the trucks, is not elevated? Can someone do that, or does everything have to be elevated?
Thank you for the question. So the parking of the trucks can be at grade in the floodplain. It's the improvements, such as a repair shop, any other amenity. Yes, the finished floor height would have to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So we wanted to be mindful of your time. I understand you may have a closed session coming up at 2:45.
One last question then. So if you did build some kind of a structure, you can't have portable like office trailers at below base flood elevation, correct?
Correct.
That's what I thought.
Now, we did recently make an ordinance change, your board did back in August, which does allow for portable bathrooms
portable
to serve
potties, yeah.
truck yards in an effort to help them be able to locate further out, possibly in some of these more floodplain prone areas.
Through the chair. So what you're saying, it would take another ordinance to allow the portable office trailer.
Oh, that's
Is that what you're saying? Why? How is that not? It's on tires and wheels.
Neil wants to address.
I would have to defer to our floodplain manager.
So to answer the question, the current FEMA guidelines would not allow that for that kind of trailer because it has to be, essentially it would be connected to electricity, water, sewer. And so it's essentially what the FEMA regulations currently say is that you just can't have employees in a flood zone. So that's why, like, if you had offices and everything, they actually need to be above, as Doug, referenced, the base flood elevation. It is extremely challenging, and that's one of the reasons why we want to have this, begin the discussion about, what land we could rezone or what we could designate or what type of, maybe truck yards you can have where they're truck parking yards, but there aren't truck maintenance yards, right? And that's kind of, the conversation that maybe we can even start having with our development community.
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Oh, sorry. You go.
While you're slipping, Neil, I'd just like to see the monies that we were allotted through SACOG, right, for the to the $100,000 to kind of help find or plan use for these truck facilities. We kind of incorporate that, with this whole process right now. It'd be great.
Okay. Definitely.
Supervisor Zigmeyer?
So, do we feel that through an audit they would come out and really look at those porta trailers or whatever and saying, hey, those cannot be there?
So what the FEMA guidelines require is that for someone to put something in a floodplain, there has to be an elevation certificate. There's actually 3 required. One when they turn in the plans, one when they put the floor slab down, and a temporary trailer like that actually would be required to be on a concrete slab, and that elevation has to be checked. And then when it's finally constructed, there has to be a final survey done and submitted to our office. And unfortunately, in the past, FEMA representatives, yes, have come, reviewed building permit files, and then gone to sites to verify the improvements.
Well, I'm one supervisor that would vote for a variance on that because I'm sick and tired of this FEMA coming in here and they're killing us on this, guys. They're absolutely throttling us on taking away all our tax growth, all our commercial growth, all our industrial growth, and saying there's nothing you can do about it. And it's hurting us right now. I mean, there's got to be a way we can use the rules to get through it. I mean, it's just 10 feet high, 15 feet high. What's going to happen when the first dryer, first walnut hauler catches on fire? We are going to be in a world of lawsuits over that because they're going to be like, hey, how am I supposed to build half of the structure 15 feet tall or 16 or 7 feet tall? It doesn't make any sense. It makes 0 sense. And for those of you that are watching, we are one of the most heavily, what is it, Steve? How much percentage of our ground is in a
70%.
70%?
Over 70.
Over 70. We have it the worst out of anyone in the whole United States right here in Sutter County.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Through the chair? Yes, go ahead, Supervisor
I
McKellar.
just, I think maybe, Mike, the way to handle that might be, Supervisor Ziegemeier, I think the way to handle that is maybe reform at a national level with FEMA, which probably is going to be unsuccessful, but I don't think we legally can issue variances for that, right, Neil? I mean, or Robin? I mean, if we do and we get audited, that's where we get into an issue of being on probation or possibly losing the ability for flood insurance, correct?
Well, Council does thoroughly appreciate Supervisor Ziegemeier suggesting that we work within the rules to achieve your goals, and that would be our recommendation.
Okay.
Through the chair, sorry. I would like to see us,
We need to do it.
really pull those rules apart and find, there's got to be other counties that have figured it out, or maybe they're onto something to where we could kind of, instead of reinventing the wheel, see what they're doing. And I'm curious to see, how is New Orleans doing it? How is Louisiana? How are they flooding every other year and then rebuilding back 100%? And we cannot. So for those of you watching, we can only rebuild back 50% of the value. 50% of the value. That means if your house burns to the ground, you're only building half the value of the house back.
Just through the chair, I think again that I look forward to working on this to identify the areas. I think it'd be great to be able to overlay a FEMA flood map on this. I think we can put our heads together and find areas to, the biggest problem we have with the truck industry is finding them a place to park. The service stuff comes afterwards. You know, like we're saying, the state has given us $100,000 to identify locations where we could not only park these but fuel them and look into the future for electric fuel and hydrogen fueling. And I think this is timing couldn't be better. So I look forward to getting into the next part of the study session. Thank you guys for your reports.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Baines. And then Neil, can you give us a rundown? So what are the future plans for this planning? Are we going, how many more study sessions? What's the time frame?
Well, I think we'll take the comments that we have from today. We'll take those back, and maybe we'll look to try to see, I think, and maybe we could have a follow-up study session, one of the first meetings in December, since there's only two next month in November, and they're relatively close together. We could bring back, some of these issues, recommendations, and like I say, have some answers. We'll further delve into the FEMA and the flood map issues and what some of the, allowances might be, and then certainly identifying areas for potential truck yards and maybe even some recommended changes to the ordinance codes relative to all these matters.
Okay, because I was thinking that each supervisor might want to engage like the public in their district and that sort of thing. So in terms of time frame, working on some sort of individual town halls or workshops in each of the districts. I'm not sure how involved they like to do it, but
Just do the chair.
feedback, yes.
Yes, I've had constituents that reached out and just kind of asked, again, when we're finding these areas for the trucking, that we need to work with the city of Yuba City as well, because, some of their ideas are out along, Garden Highway and that to locate these potential truck yards.
So I think in addition to the meetings with the public, some sort of joint meeting with the city of Yuba City. I don't know where they're at on their update. How far along, or are they in the same time frame, or is it a totally different time frame, or any idea?
I don't believe they've initiated one, and I will say our department doesn't have a timeline for trying to complete this. It's more of having the series of conversations so that if we came back with you with maybe some recommendations, then that might be a time then to begin the outreach in each district and then gather further comments and then come back before your board after we've been through all 5 districts, kind of try to synthesize all those comments and then get into, what changes need to take place.
Okay, sounds good. And thank you guys for the presentation today and productive comments. Really good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes this part of the study session. Are there any other comments before I close this meeting, the study session? Okay, then the meeting.
All aboard!
We can show you how. Live streaming can be simple and not expensive. You may already have the basic tools right in your hand. But it's more than just pushing live to communicate effectively. That's where Yuba-Sutter.live and Live Streaming YS on Facebook can help you. Make it easy to jump in. Just give us a call at 530-301-2931 or visit our website, www.yuba-sutter.live. Yuba-Sutter's home of live streaming and live streaming tools, live streaming services, technology, and training. Live streaming is Yuba-Sutter.live.